All right, let's go ahead and kick things off, get this show on the road. So first off, welcome to Best Practices to Combat Phishing. Improve your defenses to combat the threat of phishing. Really prevalent topic still in cybersecurity. Looking forward to diving in further with an expert today. So first off, my name is Chloe. If you haven't met me before, I am the Partner Marketing Manager here at Field Effect. And I just wanted to say welcome. First off, some housekeeping items. This session is being recorded and it will be sent out after the fact within the next few days, more than likely. So if there's anything that you want to go back and reference, if you want to send this on to a colleague after the fact, you will be able to do so. And also throughout the presentation today, there will be a couple of additional resources mentioned that will also be sent out with this recording. Second, that we will be answering questions for this session. If you want to go ahead and use the little Q&A box found in the Zoom toolbar, you can go ahead and submit your questions there, and we will try to get to all of them, likely toward the end of the presentation, just to make sure that we get through. And I think that's it. So let's get started and go ahead and introduce today's expert. And we're going to get a slide flip. Perfect. So Michael Russell, he has extensive experience in cybersecurity research, software development, operations, and management. Huge list coming your way right here, specializing in areas like cryptography, high performance computing, cyber defense, supply chain cybersecurity, information technology, product assurance, and the list keeps going. So extensive experience in the cybersecurity realm. Mike joined Field Effect in 2022 and focuses on helping clients achieve a secure environment via holistic assessment of their cybersecurity. So Mike, over to you to get things started.
Thanks, Chloe. Welcome, everybody. We're going to walk through controls that will help you improve your cybersecurity and your understanding of how to combat phishing. So our agenda today, we're going to talk a little bit about the risk of phishing in 2024. It changes over time. We thought we'd quantify it to let you understand what your risk as an initial access factor from phishing is at this point in time. We then thought we'd walk through 3 categories of security controls that can help limit either the likelihood or the impact of phishing to reduce your risk. These are security awareness training, technical controls, and incident response readiness. And we'll wrap up today's discussion with how Field Effect might be able to help you improve your defenses against phishing attacks. I'll start by talking phishing risk in terms of the numbers. It remains a persistent threat to organizations in 2024. Pulled up a couple sources of data for what % of attacks originate from phishing. 2 sources of note here. The Mandiant's M-Trends report from this year said 17% of all compromises are the result of phishing. The data breach investigation report from Verizon said it was as high as 25%. I've seen other sources in between and around this. We don't know an exact number, but somewhere between 17 and 25% of all compromises have phishing as a root. So a quarter of compromises start with a phishing vector. Important to note that threat actor tactics are improving as defenses evolve. Things that worked 10 years ago obviously don't work as effectively today, and threat actors know this, and they evolve their techniques as they need to as defenses evolve to limit their ability to be effective with phishing threats. There are technical defeats for automated message and link techniques, so the days of being able to identify just based on a link whether something is good or bad are ending. So something like safe links, if you're using that from Microsoft 365, it's not the be and all and end all. It was when it was first introduced to stop phishing. We even see QR codes instead of links, so that somebody will use a device that's maybe not as well protected to visit the site you're trying to keep them from. So sure, the link isn't there, but the QR code can be accessed via a camera, and you don't have that camera protected. Adversaries are able to circumvent the defenses you put in place. I just want to make a mention of our suspicious email analysis service team here at Field Effect. They are our experts in phishing. They deal with the latest and greatest items in phishing, and they've actually put out a blog earlier this year summarizing all the new tactics they saw in 2023. We worked behind the scenes with that team to understand what the most effective controls were to deal with the newer techniques that we're seeing and the techniques that continue to be persistently used by threat actors. We'll start walking through those now. First category will be security awareness. Fundamentally, it's important to have a phishing reporting service, preferably integrated into your email client so that your users have access to something that can give them a hint whether a message is good or bad. Providing users with a way to safely report a message that appears suspicious is a great start. It's all about culture here. Change your culture, so instead of clicking and hoping for the best, if you're not sure, ask for help. Provide a means that an expert can help your users assess, is this safe or is this not? And develop a culture where you don't just click on things, you ask first before clicking on things. And a tool integrated right into your email client is a great way to do this. Make it a positive experience to report false positives. There's nothing worse than reporting something because you're just not quite sure and getting a message back of course that's safe. Why would you even send that to us? Why would you waste our time on this problem? The counter to that is they were so interested in being secure that they asked for help, and then when you don't give good help, give a good response for a false positive, what's the likelihood they're going to submit again, even if they're really not sure and it turns out to be malicious? Probably not very good. So having a culture where it's okay to report false positives, to be secure, is a great defense for your users to understand that they're not in it alone. There's going to be support for them in deciding whether an email is good or bad. The quality of phishing has improved to the point where you can't rely on poor grammar, poor formatting, typos. Those elements just aren't present in good quality phishing anymore. So users can be tricked, and they can be tricked effectively enough that having an environment where they're not encouraged to report and rewarded for reporting and rewarded for asking for help just leads to unnecessary clicks. We have an example of the Field Effects suspicious email analysis service that we have available to our MDR clients. It's one that integrates directly into your email client, and we have an example of it here that I've just brought up on the screen. You can submit a message, and when you submit it via your email client, it asks, did you click on any of the links, yes or no? No? Well, that's hopeful, but if yes, the sooner you hear about it, the better, because the longer the time period between when a user clicks and when you learn about it and are able to start taking proactive measures to stop a compromise, that leads to much more expensive incident response. The sooner you can respond, the better. So a user who clicks and then tells you they clicked gives you a much better fighting chance to defend against the threat actor than a user who clicks and doesn't tell you and you find out about it through other means. Did you open any of the attachments? Same idea. Attached documents are much less used than they were in the past for phishing. Links have taken over in the technology used by threat actors. However, historically, attached documents were the primary vector for phishing. So did you open an attached document? Yes or no? If you did, that's okay because you're reporting it. No, even better, it means we're not exposed. Did you enter a username password anywhere? Did anyone get your login information? Yes, you can do something about it. No, even better. Additional comments or details. Give your users an opportunity to tell you why they're concerned about it. We give through the Field Effect tool the option to remove it from the inbox. So if they don't want it, because they're pretty sure that that message is not one that they want to come back to, they can click on that and submit. Once a user has submitted, you want to give them feedback. So here's an example of what our Seize service sends to users. Very clearly at the top, your result, malicious, something got submitted. You've now been told this message, which by the way is dummy dated, it's not real. The message you sent in that had this information is malicious. What should you do? Very clear instructions on what you should do or not do. Indicators of why the email is malicious. This is helpful for determining yourself whether something is good or bad. If you submitted something bad and because you thought it didn't quite just look quite right, and you see that it's matched by what makes this email malicious, when it came from a low reputation domain, or it contained text which prompt the user in line with social engineering techniques. Oh, good, I understood. I got that second one when I submitted the message. If your user gets positive reinforcement, they will submit again. They're much less likely to click. You lower your latent click rate. This is the kind of control that can drastically help your users be better at identifying phishing, and your technical teams from not having to respond to as many phishing attacks because you can get in front of them before your users click on suspicious or malicious links. So Super important. It leads us off. Have a reporting tool that's interactive that gives your users feedback so that they can ask the tool or service, is safe to open, and relatively quickly get a response, which allows them to go on with their activities without having to involve IT personnel or long periods between the reception of the email, the reporting of the email, and the reporting of the results from your tool. The faster, the better, the smoother for your business operation. This one's an oldie but a goodie. The next control we're going to look at is security awareness training. It's a necessary item to educate your workforce on what the state of the art is in phishing. As I mentioned earlier, you're not going to have traditional cues of poor grammar and spelling mistakes and templates that don't look quite real or look relatively poor. Phishers have evolved to the ability where they can submit really realistic looking emails. Here at Field Effect, we offer professional services where we do perform phishing campaigns for our clients. We come up with some very good templates that it takes an expert to differentiate between a real and a fake, and phishers out there can do the exact same thing. So training to staff on what to look for, focus on teaching your users to report all suspicious emails before they click. As we mentioned, having a tool to do this that gives interactive feedback is great to ensure that your users get quick feedback and can take action themselves and are empowered to be part of your cybersecurity solution rather than impaired by it and not able to function to the best of their abilities in your business. Questions to ask: is the sender who they claim to be? Is this the real sender? Is it from the right domain? Is it the right person? Are there issues with who the sender is? Were you expecting this type of message from the sender? If it's unusual, that should be a flag that something might be out of place. Do the attachments and the formatting of the email match normal business practices? Is something unusual? If something's unusual, ask for help. If it's relatively okay, you're taking a risk by clicking it, but you've done your diligence to at least assess, no, I don't think this is suspicious, and move on. One thing that we're seeing as a newer change in security awareness training is the need for tailored training for higher risk staff. This is typically those in your C-suite or others with high public exposure. It's easy to build profiles on them and tailor phishing for such users because there's a lot of information about such users available on the internet. Also, your financial staff. This is primarily for the subcase of phishing related to business email compromise. It's becoming a larger problem. Phishing is its starting point. If your financial staff are aware of what your procedures are and are able to react to them and have a strong understanding of what is and is not suspicious to arrive via email, you're in a better place to resist phishing against these more highly targeted staff. Make email security training a part of employee onboarding whenever possible. Don't have it as an add-on, have it built into the process so that when a new user gets their computer and their accounts, they know what the standard is and they know how it's done within your organization. So it's not something that's bolted on the side, which is always an indicator that a security control isn't as effective as it could be. We have an example of a more modern phish. There are no typos here. The ability to statically scan the emails, the link is gone because it's a QR code. They're even so helpful as to tell the user, oh, use your phone to scan this. Phishers are developing techniques that are outpacing the defenses that have been put in place based on their previous techniques. And this is going to be an ongoing battle for years to come. Last item related to security awareness training: conduct phishing tests. It's really important to know your latent click rate, the number of users who are going to click on a phishing message that they receive, so that you can quantify your overall risk of phishing attacks. There are actually industry averages. The ones you see here come from the Microsoft Digital Defense Report from January. Worldwide, they saw a click rate on phishing email of about 7.8%. They saw a submission rate to submission tools at about 2.3% and a report rate of about 11.3%. These numbers, if you're finding that your rates are lower on the good stats reporting or higher on click rate or credential submission rates, you may want to engage in more security awareness training or phishing training for your staff because you're clicking more frequently than others. The only way to really know what this ratio is to test for it. Just a caution about phishing tests. If your goal is to evaluate users, a blind phishing test is a very difficult way to do it. And there's a number of ethical considerations to take into account here. Is a blind test against your users fair? Is especially when you're trying to deceive them. If your goal with phishing is to deceive your users and to punish them via security awareness training, you may want to reconsider the purpose for phishing and orient it more around understanding what your latent risk is, that you can take other measures to defend against it. That's, in our opinion, the best way you'll be successful with phishing tests, to lower your overall risk by making adjustments to your other security controls to compensate for users' willingness to click. Okay. Another example here, two-factor setup, another QR code, sorry, repeat QR codes. The whole point is there are techniques in play here to evade the traditional defenses you'd have that hopefully users would be aware of. Why would you do this? Well, there's the social engineering prompt that if you don't do this immediately or within 2 days, you're going to get locked out. These types of things that should encourage your users to report such messages because they see that there's social engineering cues and there's phishing cues in the messages. Your training should hopefully allow you to do that, and your tests should hopefully see higher reporting rates so that users are asking for help more. So that's a sign that they're absorbing your training and benefiting from it. Okay, we'll move now into a little bit more technical controls, things you can do to help your network that are more within the domain of IT. The first one, it's fundamental, use email security solutions. You need spam filtering. You need solutions that will scan all your email and attachment for threats, quarantine automatically as necessary, and check any and all links before a user is able to use them. These are fundamental security controls that are available in most email security products at this point, and they're something you need in line to your systems. Hopefully you all have them already. If you don't, it's vitally important that you have scanning solutions in your email processing chain. Having tools isn't the only thing you need to do. You need to make sure you have logging enabled so that if you have a compromise, you have the audit trails for forensics to go through to determine the root cause of your compromise and when it happened. The more effective your logging is, the faster forensics will be able to make this determination, and the faster you'll be able to recover from an incident or from a compromise. You want to make sure your authentication logs are on, your audit logging for access to resources are enabled, and your email logging is in place. You want to make sure you're retaining these for at least 90 days so you can go back as far as you need to in an investigation to quickly identify root cause. You also want to make sure that you audit rules in your mailboxes. Look for rules that forward email externally or delete messages. These are a preferred tactic for a threat actor who establishes a beachhead within your network and wants to maintain it without getting caught. They can then send emails that match a format, and they've got a command and control channel back to within your network. Make sure you're auditing rules and you have standards for rules so that you can avoid common threat actor techniques once they make their first entrance into your network. Enforce user access controls. Follow the principle of least privilege for all your accounts. So hopefully you're using role-based access control. The idea here is a user has only the permissions they need to accomplish their tasks and nothing more. You want this to be minimized at all times. You want to ensure that privileged accounts are segmented from user accounts. We mean high privilege accounts that have access to very sensitive data, and administrator accounts. Ideally, those accounts would not be used for internet activities or user class activities such as web browsing and email, but only for the tasks that they're designated for. Common practice, my user account, mrussell, I would have an mrussell-a or -admin for my administrative activities. I wouldn't have administrative privileges on my standard account, so that if I was compromised, my standard account would be compromised and not the one that has more elevated privileges for other tasks so that I can do my job. This is now best practice. We hope that many of you are engaged in this, but this segmentation of your user base can drastically lower the impact of a compromise because there'll be less threat surface for an adversary to compromise based on once they're initially in your network via phish. Be very wary of shared and delegated mailboxes. Um, Not everyone practices the same activities and are as effective with their application of security awareness principles. And all it takes is one user who is not as wary of phishing messages to compromise everyone with access to a shared or delegated mailbox. So be wary of that and use them only as necessary, and have training associated with those accounts for what's expected of users so that everyone's behaving to the same standard when it comes to security awareness. Audit your accounts regularly. We've already mentioned validating inbox rules. Make sure that rules are there that should be and that they haven't been added or that they're unusual. Flag those, follow up on them, and deal with them as necessary. Have alerts for all changes to admin and privileged users and groups. It's a common threat actor technique once they're in your network to add administrative accounts or privileges to the accounts they compromise so that they can move laterally within your network. Have monitoring in place to make sure that this can't happen. Spot check your privileged accounts and groups monthly, all users at least annually, so that you have a good understanding of a good reassurance that your users are in the right roles and permissions, and there haven't been unexpected additions that elevate certain users' privileges above what they should be. This is all IT activity. It's all processes. There's not a lot of technology issues here. It's stuff that virtually any organization can do if they're willing to dedicate the time and effort to it. Conditional access policies. This is a relatively new one. It's been in place for a few years, but you can use conditional access policies to govern all access to your organizational resources. In the context of phishing, alert on or deny access to unusual logins. So a credential compromise, so a user gets phished and they submit their credentials to the threat actor. The threat actor will generally validate that those credentials work, and they'll do so through an unusual login. The login will come from either a place that would be subject to impossible travel, so it comes from a part of the world where the legitimate user could not have reached as quickly as the login happened because the user was seen somewhere else and the time to travel between those locations is infeasible. An alert like that is unusual. Unusual logins are also from suspicious internet service providers or less secure internet service providers. They're outside the user's usual behavior, and these can be red flags that credentials have been compromised and some user within your network has been phished. If you alert on these, you'll have slower reaction. If you're wanting to be more aggressive, deny these unusual logins or even lock accounts that demonstrate these unusual logins, you can get ahead of phishing in a lot of instances. And even if a user clicks, this type of conditional access control can step in and mitigate the harm from that compromise very early in the threat actor's activities within your network. Good policy to have. Relatively new, the last couple of years, these have been gaining more favor. Very effective to limit the exposure to your organization if you do have a successful phish against you. Okay, next item up, domain, well, DMARC. It's a series of protocols and things that you configure related to your mail servers to ensure that mail is actually sent by you and to ensure that mail is actually sent by others who claim to be who they are. So the purpose for this was to eliminate the ability to spoof domains. So if you send a message from a domain, DMARC will help you ensure that it actually came from that domain and not somewhere else. At the time of its conception and early introduction in 2016, there's been a relatively slow implementation of DMARC, but over the last few years, we've seen it become pretty much a de facto standard amongst organizations that everyone should be doing. It's a best practice. It has been for a number of years, and now it's pretty much an essential practice. The advantage to this, if you set up DMARC on your domain, no one can pretend to be you. No one can spoof your domain. The advantage for you in terms of stopping phishing, messages that come in can pass DMARC checks even if they're phishing messages, but they can't be from organizations that have implemented DMARC. So if all organizations implement DMARC, spoofing no longer becomes an issue, and it makes it that much harder for threat actors to conduct phishing activities. So Be wary of allowing your security tools that assist in the processing of messages of your email gateway of being allow listed within your DMARC records. You want to be as restrictive as possible in what is allowed to send email on your behalf, because that'll do the most to ensure that other organizations receiving email from your domain are actually receiving messages that originate from your domain and not from a spoofer. So at this point, DMARC should be considered an essential security control for all organizations. We'll move to a control that's good for limiting the impact of a phishing campaign against your organization. Make sure you're using a DNS firewall. This takes advantage of the security intelligence derived from researchers worldwide to prevent access to known malicious sites. So use either a DNS firewall or protective DNS, depending on which vendor you're working with, to ensure that your users can't access known malicious sites. So if a phisher is using a domain and that domain gets flagged by any researcher worldwide, it's quickly passed amongst the community. And if your organization receives a message with that domain in it and one of your users attempts to click it, a DNS firewall will ensure that it gets sinkholed and that user isn't victimized. Basically, it avoids the known bad and malicious sites. It doesn't avoid the unknowns, but it helps by not allowing your users to go places that have already been identified as suspicious or malicious. Just as a heads up to our client base from Field Effect, for those of you who are already Field Effect clients, we offer a DNS firewall as part of the Field Effect MDR solution, and it's configurable through the Field Effect portal. I brought up an image of the Field Effect portal. It's under the Administration tab in the left menu. Go to DNS firewall and enable. There's a number of settings you'll have to fill in after this, and we have support and how-to guides on how to do this within our support portal. And if you're not sure about how to do this and you want more information, reach out to your point of contact or the support team here at Field Effect, and we'd be very happy to help you enable this functionality so that you have a little bit more containment on any phishing messages that your users do click on. Every little bit helps. Okay, another security control that's relatively interesting and more of an evolving one is monitoring for typo squat domains. I've taken advantage of something that technical people will know about sans serif fonts. They don't do a very good job of differentiating between characters and letters in the alphabet. There's two email messages here, Michael, my first name, at legit.com, and Michael at oneegit.com, and they look exactly the same. And if I was a phishing actor, I would register for DMARC on oneegit.com and make it look as legitimate as possible. And the chances a user who sees it displayed like that tells the difference is pretty low. There is a difference, a slight angle, but over the course of a day, is everyone going to notice that? Is it fair to ask them to notice that? Simple change in the default fonts used in your email client reveals that they are very different, and the user can clearly see a difference now. Minor thing to look for, a major thing in terms of impact. Should your users really be responsible for doing this? Well, hopefully they try, but this is truly a technical problem under the hood. So we really encourage you to use anti-phishing protections such as the first contact safety tip and impersonation protection from Microsoft. If you're using another cloud provider such as Google, they have equivalent controls that have slightly different names but do the same functions as these. The first time you receive a message from someone, it gives you the little flag, which I think I have an example of here next. You don't often get email from megan.boeing at contoso.com, straight out of Microsoft's documentation. Why is this important? You click there and you get a little phishing, a bit of education on phishing that'll explain why first contact is so dangerous. Because it may be that it looks like Michael at legit.com, but it's not. And when you get this message, it's just a little bit of help for your users that to help with the technical issue of the ability to register lookalike domains. Impersonation protection is similar. It behaves similarly, and the messages pop up similarly. I don't have an example for you. Again, the idea is to give your users as much help as possible in identifying when they're being when an address is being spoofed by a typo squat. For those who don't know what typo squatting is, I didn't explain this earlier. Anytime you take legit sites such as legit.com, which I made up, and you vary characters within it so that it's very close to that. That's what typo squatting is. And you can see the difference between these. One, egit.com and legit.com are very different sites, but they're very closely related. So maintaining a list of typo squat domains that are frequently used for domains frequently used by your organization, just that extra bit of security against phishing that tries to blend in to what's normal for your everyday users. Another control that's less IT and more within your finance team. This is specifically related to business email compromise via phishing. Make sure you develop fraud-resistant financial processes. So formal processes for receiving invoices, processing payments, and changing bank account details. Make sure they include identity validation that happens outside of email that is very hard to circumvent. Don't allow these things, don't allow invoices, payments, or changes to your bank account details to happen if you can't validate identity. This will set your users up to not fall for scams that are very well crafted and intended for them to fall victim to, but instead have a fighting chance to resist. Always ensure there are secondary validation channels for these types of requests that you trust, and email shouldn't be considered sufficient. That way, it's just that much harder for an adversary to overcome your security controls. The key point here, make business email compromise as administratively difficult as possible. And you're going to have a user experience issue that you'll have pushback from your financial teams on, but they understand they do not want to transfer large sums of money to the wrong people. So having controls in place to prevent this, though they're not IT controls, is tremendously useful. I left this one much later in the presentation. Use multi-factor authentication. Don't rely on credentials alone, password-based credentials alone. Microsoft Research published papers in 2018 and 2021 about the risk of compromised accounts that have and do not have multi-factor authentication. And multi-factor authentication has been shown to reduce the risk for compromised accounts by 99.9%. That is the most telling statistic that you hopefully will need to see as to why you need to have multi-factor authentication if you don't have it now. If you are moving to multi-factor, or if you have multi-factor already, make sure your solutions resist what we call MFA fatigue. What MFA fatigue is where you pester a user to just accept via yes/no prompt, for example, a message by pinging them repeatedly until they say yes, just for it to go away. A pin-based solution is better than a push-based solution because the user has to enter a number, and it's much less likely that they'll enter, say, a 6-digit number just to make a prompt go away, because they'll investigate it further. Like, why am I being prompted for this? I shouldn't be. I didn't ask for this. And anything that can reduce the impact of MFA fatigue, where you accidentally allow something that shouldn't be allowed, is a good practice. We also are mentioning to stay ahead of threat actors by using phish-resistant multi-factor authentication solutions when possible. This is a newer class that has been pushed by users, and you're going to see more of it in the year and years to come. Historically, this would have been FIDO2 compliant hardware tokens. The more modern solution is passkeys. Google has recently adopted these within their password management systems. We expect Microsoft to follow suit, and pretty much every other provider. They're probably the future of multi-factor authentication and authentication in general, and it's something you want to be aware of, read up on, and follow as their implementation starts to take over in this space. They're a very strong form of multi-factor authentication, and they will become more ubiquitous now that they're supported by the major identity providers. Finally, use managed detection and response. We're specifically mentioning MDR as opposed to endpoint detection and response, because if you don't have a dedicated security operations center, you really should be outsourcing it to a managed data detection and response provider so that someone's monitoring your network for you. If you have the capacity to monitor your own network, an EDR solution works just fine because it'll give you all the alerts you need to be able to make determinations on what you should action and what you should not. If you don't have the capacity to operate your own security operations center, a managed solution will ensure that you get only what you need to via triaged alerts, expert support, and catching threat actors early in a compromise because your expert users were able to monitor full time. With Field Effect MDR, you'll get all these protections. It's our primary product as a company. We encourage you to consider it. For those who have it already, you have these protections in place, and hopefully you're enjoying the benefits of them. Vitally important that you have detection and response capabilities on your endpoints so that when your users are phished, there are endpoint solutions monitoring for unusual behavior on the host where they got phished, and hopefully those alerts will trigger and alert you early on in the course of the compromise so you can deal with it while the impact is still relatively minor to your organization. Okay, we'll move on to the next class, incident response readiness. Fundamentally, this is about having an incident response plan. Know what you're going to do in the case of a phishing attack. Have a playbook for how you respond to it that all of your incident responders are aware of and know how to follow, so that you can quickly get to the root cause of a phishing compromise and reduce the impact by not allowing the threat actor to be in your network for very long. If you don't have a plan and your client, you can click on the link that'll be in the presentation. I've shown a screenshot of our support center. If you're within the Field Effect portable, go to the support center, click on knowledge base, click on professional services, and under policy templates, you'll see that we have an incident response plan template and an incident response communications plan template, amongst many other cybersecurity policy templates and information security templates. These two in particular, if you don't have one and you want to get one quickly, these are a choose your own adventure type of template. Text is highlighted in yellow. You make decisions as to what text you'd like to keep and what you don't want to keep, and you can quickly have an incident response plan that's up to the standard of what we use here at Field Effect. We make this available to all of our clients. It's in our portal now, so by all means, help yourselves, and please do create a plan. Having a plan will allow you to respond more efficiently and effectively, and that'll reduce the impact from any future compromises, which will lower your overall risk from phishing. So please download our templates. We'll make that link available to all attendees. So Field Effect can help, as we've mentioned before. We're not the only solution you're going to have, but we can definitely help our MDR clients via the Seize button that you can add into your email toolbar, and you can turn on Seize responses to submitters. Your users can then ask Seize for help in determining whether a message is legitimate or malicious. And if they ask for help and wait until they get a response and then don't action a message if it's determined malicious, or move on with their day if it is, you'll have a much lower click rate, because your users will be very comfortable submitting and asking for help because they know they'll get a response. They won't be treated badly by that response, and it'll be timely enough that they can then move on with whatever activity was required in the email if it was legitimate. So let our experts determine whether a message is safe or not. Help your users determine this, because the techniques for it are getting more and more complicated, and the quality of phishing messages keeps improving. Turn on the DNS firewall within Field Effect MDR. Ensure that your users can't visit known malicious sites. There is the ability to create exceptions to this for users whose job is to investigate such things, such as your security operations staff, but the vast majority of your users do not need access to things that are identified as malicious, and a DNS firewall can help avoid accidentally visiting those locations. Download and complete an incident response plan if you don't have one already. And if you're looking for more help because you need more in-depth analysis, please do consider Field Effect Professional Services for more assistance. An example of one such service is our Incident Response Readiness Service. This is for organizations looking to be better prepared to respond to an incident, looking to write an incident response plan with help, and looking to evaluate and understand what their threat surface is. We do analysis across a number of topics related to incident response readiness and threat surface management. It works by completing a 2-hour survey. We then send back a tailored IR plan and incident response playbooks. We'll work with you to discuss your readiness and your threat surface to ensure that you understand and know where you need to make improvements to lower your risk from incidents occurring within your network. We do check-ins after we've had these discussions to make sure you're on track, and then to answer any questions that come up, because solutions sometimes are very easy to say, or recommendations are easy to make. It can be much more difficult in practice to implement them effectively. And as part of such a service, we ensure that our clients are able to implement our recommendations, and we work through any challenges they have during the implementation process. For organizations that are not already Field Effect MDR clients, the Incident Response Readiness Service comes with a 90-day trial of our Field Effect MDR solution. So all in all, phishing remains a major source of risk to your network. It's not likely to change anytime soon. It's roughly responsible for a quarter of all compromises in the cybersecurity space. We walked through a number of the effective security controls to help limit either the likelihood, so the chance something happens, or the impact, what happens after a phishing compromise has been successful. You combine these and you can lower your risk from phishing by reducing both the likelihood and impact of phishing occurring in your network. Just a reminder that Field Effect is here to help. We're always happy to chat about improving your cybersecurity. Thanks very much. Chloe?
Awesome. Thank you so much, Mike, for that walkthrough. We have a lot of questions to get through here. So I will send just one reminder out to the audience. If you do have questions, please feel free to submit those in the little Q&A box in the Zoom toolbar. Okay, here we go. We are going to jump back to 2MFA. Getting this question from a few folks is, can you review what the difference is between pin-based versus push-based solutions?
Absolutely. I kind of bumbled my way through that during the presentation. I apologize. Push-based is where you've set up a message that will prompt you and say maybe your phone, is this you logging in? Why, yes, it is. Or no, it's not. That's one of the earlier forms of MFA we saw through applications. It was a tremendous improvement at the time because you weren't no longer reliant just on credentials. You had that second factor now that was helping you say yes or no. Unfortunately, threat actors figured out that users would get annoyed if they got a lot of these at 3 in the morning and it was waking them up. And they eventually would just say, yes, it was, leave me alone. That was the concept of MFA fatigue. The control of just being yes or no, binary, 2 answers, wasn't working as effectively as it could. So they introduced the concept of pins. A pin is just basically a number, a one-time key that your application gives you to then put into whatever's requesting that access to say, yeah, it's me, and I have the number from the secondary factor. That's what a pin is. Pin technology is not new. It's been around for a very long time, but in the context of multi-factor authentication, it was more widely adopted as a means to resist MFA fatigue. Pins, unfortunately, can be intercepted via something called a man-in-the-middle attack, so they're not the best. So there's also a class of phishing-resistant multi-factor authentication, which are hardware tokens or passkeys, newer technology, that are the next step as we see threat actors evolve to actually be able to deal with pins as well as push messages. So it's a bit of an arms race between attackers and defenders, and phishing resistant multi-factor authentication is what's coming, and it's where organizations are going to want to move to as we try to overcome the threat actor ability to phish pin messages. At this point in time, threat actors are able to deal with push-based notifications, and you should look to phase those out. Pins still work, but they're where we see threat actors developing technology. So moving further towards phishing resistant is really where we'd like to see people go. Hopefully that answers your question.
Awesome. Okay, next one, we're diving back into typo squatting domains. How do you handle hackers that use advanced special characters, for example, where the letter E is represented as 2 different character sets in the domain? Very difficult to detect.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. How do we go about this? That's long been a technique that threat actors have been able to use. It's just not a widely used technique, might not be as widely known. You can manage that via something like DNS Twist, the open source application that you can allow it to search for wider character sets, like say Unicode characters. You can also do restrictions to actually follow the RFC and domain names. It does limit international users from sites that involve international, like non-ASCII characters, printable keyboard characters, but it can limit your vulnerability to alternate character sets. Unfortunately, there's no easy solution around that. The system was not designed with security in mind. It was designed with ease of use in mind. And this is one of those cases where you can choose to limit ease of use to reduce your risk, or you have to do things like technical tools to search the wider character sets and get in the way of all possible type of squats, and just not just the traditional ones.
Okay, hopefully that answers the question. Okay, next one. Do you think that internal criticism and or negative consequences for things like false positives will diminish due to changing cyber regulatory landscape in the US? And now that boards and C-suite probably want to know about possible red flags to minimize potential liability and risk exposure.
So I certainly hope so. As you can tell, I advocate for empathy with your user base. It's not their fault that the threat actors are very capable. Yeah, you hope that they see the signs, but it's not enough to expect your users alone to combat the problem. You need technical controls in place to help reduce both impact and likelihood. And that's what the driver of was of a lot of the presentation today. Will regulatory pressure help? Yes, because there's a lot of people who think similarly to us, in the sense that it can't just be your users. There's got to be an understanding that if you don't report false positives, you're not going to report the true positives, because the true positives are probably harder to spot than the false positives. So if there is an empathy for your user base and support for the reporting of false positives, it's the whole battle against phishing isn't going to work, because your users won't feel empowered. They'll feel like they need to hide. They don't want to report phishing. So even when they do get phished and they know it, they won't want to report for the fear of being reprimanded for doing that. Or worse, report a false positive and get the reprimand for no reason. We really believe that organizations need to demonstrate some empathy for their users and support for their user base, and change the culture around being cautious to being being a virtue and not something to be teased or ridiculed, which was more so the case in the past. I can attest to being ridiculed for submitting something that looked pretty good. And I got ridiculed by a CISO, and it came back that it was actually malicious. I didn't get ridiculed after that because I noticed something in it, because I'm fairly well versed in cybersecurity. And I got teased and I went, just watch. And it came back bad. And they're like, how did you know? Like, there's no way someone would ask me to do that in that manner. It doesn't make sense. I thought it was dumb the way they were asking me to do it. It was so good that I thought it must be a mistake internally. And that's why I asked the question, because I didn't think there was a chance there was a real fish, and it was. So empathy for your users. Otherwise, you're going to have a much bigger problem, because you're going to be containing incidents rather than responding quickly to them.
Thank you. Okay, next up, is there any way to automate the checking of inbox rules for all users?
Yes. Within, say, the email tools, not so much. Within Field Effect MDR, it's one of the analytics we use behind the scenes. We move through inbox rules and we look for suspicious inbox rules that have a whole bunch of characteristics that make them suspicious. And then we produce AROs for our client base that warn them that, these messages might be, these rules may be malicious. You may want to take action to remove them, and advise your user and contain what could be an incident against that user. Within the actual tools, I'm much less aware of, I'm not actually all that aware that there are techniques within the tools themselves, but you could easily audit those tools and script the technique to audit them, or get a security tool that will do it for you. For example, Field Effect MDR does that for you if you have it enabled to connect to your email provider.
Next up, are there any plans to add automated malicious email checking and alerting to the Seize feature?
Okay, automated. Meaning, I'm assuming you mean by automated, as messages come in through your gateway, they're automatically processed. Within Seize, no, because that would be a drastic violation of user privacy. Seize is intended by its design to be something that's done with approval. So a user decides to make a submission and they agree to share the private information to get help. Doing it automatically is a design, uh, a way you could design the service. It's not the way we chose to design Cs, and I do not believe we plan to change the design for Cs. However, you could introduce tools into your network that would do this behind the scenes and add such detection within your email security products. And my guess is if you have high-end email security products, you have functionality that can do this for you now. It would be something along the lines of deep inspection. And I encourage you to check with the vendor documentation because there may be methods you could use now for this.
Okay, and along the same lines of email security solutions, are there any alternative email security solutions that you would recommend to a company?
Offhand, we don't tend to do recommendations outside of consulting because we'd be recommending products that could be our competitors. Field Effect does not offer a product in that market space at this point in time, so we don't have any direct competitors, but many of the companies that do are our competitors within the MDR space, so I prefer not to name organization names because of that. But quick search in the internet should reveal like a number of decent products that are out there for you.
Okay. One more here. How can we verify if a meeting link is valid or phishing without opening it on our PC?
Traditionally, we encouraged users to look at the link. Now, links are very, very long, and they use character tricks that can obscure where you're actually going. Looking at a link may not be the most effective way, but it's a good practice. Right click on the link and see what the link actually is and not just what it says in an email, because what the text says and what the link actually is are often different. If you're using Microsoft-based products, safe links, make sure it's enabled on the back end so that every link that a user sees goes through the safe links process. Have a DNS firewall in place so that if a user clicks on a link and they have to go to a site, it goes through your DNS firewall. And if the site's known as malicious, it can interdict and sideline the user before they go to the malicious site. Lastly, that's about what you can do at this point in time, given the way threat actors behave and the way they can redirect through the use of content delivery networks. The traditional way of right click and see if it's the right domain is kind of antiquated, unfortunately, and we need to help our users more because yes, we would like them to look, but if they can't decipher it, we really need a technical solution under the hood, such as safe links, to provide them with a little bit more reassurance that they're not doing the wrong thing by following the link.
Okay. Going through here. One question came through. Will the recording of this event be made available? Yes, it absolutely will be. So there will be a link delivered to all registrants of the webinar, likely within the next few days. It's going to include the full recording, including the Q&A. So look for that within the next few. And just got a comment. We've used Covalence for the last year and have had no issues with any business compromise or ransomware. So not a question, but a comment. Very nice. Okay, I think we're good for now. So Mike, thank you so much for sharing your expertise with all of our attendees today. As just mentioned, this recording is going to go out to all of you to go back and reference if you'd like to share with a colleague if you think it would be helpful for them. So please feel free to share this link once it makes its way to your inbox. And thank you all for attending today and taking the time.